Simon Cowell had learned to read people within seconds. 20 years of judging had given him an almost supernatural ability to assess someone before they opened their mouth. So when Marcus Webb walked onto the Got Talent stage that rainy October evening, Simon's face revealed what everyone in the theater was thinking. This wasn't going to go well. Marcus was 53 years old, though he looked closer to 70. His clothes were wrinkled and mismatched, a brown jacket over a faded shirt that had seen better decades. His gray hair was long and unkempt, his beard wild and untrimmed. His shoes were held together with duct tape. Everything about him screamed homelessness, desperation, and the kind of broken dreams that audition shows usually turned into cruel spectacles. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others exchanged glances that said, "This is going to be awkward." Simon crossed his arms, his expression already skeptical. The other judges looked sympathetic but wary. They'd seen this before. Someone with nothing left to lose, standing on a stage, about to embarrass themselves in front of millions. The host approached Marcus with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Britain's Got Talent. Tell us your name and where you're from." Marcus's voice was rough, like gravel that had been sitting in rain for years. "Marcus Webb. I'm from London. I live in London." "And what do you do, Marcus?" There was a pause. Marcus looked down at his taped-together shoes, then back up at the host. When he spoke, there was no self-pity in his voice, just tired honesty. "I'm homeless. I've been living on the streets for 8 years." The audience went silent. The uncomfortable energy shifted to something else, pity mixed with dread. This was either going to be inspiring or heartbreaking, and no one knew which. At the judges' table, Simon's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. This wasn't a novelty act. This was real life walking onto his stage. 8 years? The host asked gently. "Can you tell us what happened?" Marcus took a breath. His hands, weathered and scarred, gripped the microphone stand. "I used to be a teacher, music teacher. I had a wife, Sarah. We had a good life. Then she got sick. Cancer. It took everything we had fighting it. And in the end," his voice cracked, "in the end, it took her anyway. After she died, I couldn't go back to the classroom, couldn't go back to the house, couldn't go back to anything. I just fell through the cracks." One of the judges, a woman, was already tearing up. The audience sat in heavy silence. This wasn't entertainment. This was someone's life stripped bare under stage lights. "But you're here today," the host said. "What are you going to perform for us?" For the first time, something changed in Marcus's expression. A flicker of something that might have been hope, or maybe just muscle memory of who he used to be. "I'm going to sing, opera. It's what Sarah loved. She used to say I had a gift. I stopped believing that a long time ago. But last week I was singing for spare change outside the tube station, and someone said I should audition here. So here I am." Simon leaned forward slightly, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. Opera, from a homeless man in taped shoes. This was either going to be surprisingly competent or absolutely disastrous. "All right, Marcus," Simon said, his voice carrying across the theater. "Show us what you've got." The backing track began. Not a pop song, not a contemporary ballad, but Puccini. Nessun Dorma, one of the most challenging pieces in the operatic repertoire. The piece that had launched careers and destroyed reputations. The audience exchanged worried glances. This was ambitious to the point of delusion. The judges sat back, preparing to witness either a miracle or a tragedy. Marcus closed his eyes. His weathered hands released the microphone stand, and he began to sing. The first note that emerged from his mouth stopped time. It wasn't just good. It wasn't just technically proficient. It was transcendent. His voice filled every corner of the massive theater with a power and clarity that seemed impossible from someone so broken down by life. Rich, resonant, perfectly controlled. The voice of a trained professional. The voice of someone who had studied for years. The voice of someone who belonged on the stage of the Royal Opera House, not on the streets of London. The audience's collective jaw dropped. People sat forward in their seats. The skeptical expressions vanished, replaced by shock, then wonder, then something approaching awe. At the judges' table, Simon's arms slowly uncrossed. His mouth opened slightly. The other judges were frozen, transfixed. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. Marcus sang through the first verse with absolute mastery. His Italian pronunciation was flawless. His breath control was extraordinary. He navigated the difficult passages with the ease of someone who had sung them 1,000 times. And more than technical skill, there was emotion. Raw, painful, beautiful emotion. He was singing about love and loss and refusing to give up hope. He was singing his own story through Puccini's words. By the time he reached the famous final crescendo, Vincerò, vincerò, vinceram, the entire theater was on its feet. The standing ovation began before he even finished the final note. 2,000 people erupting in applause that was part celebration, part apology for every judgment they'd made when he walked on stage. The note held, impossibly long, impossibly powerful. When it finally faded, the applause became deafening. Simon Cowell stood up, not slowly, not with his usual calculated movements. He stood up like someone who had just witnessed something that shattered his understanding of the world. He walked around the judges' table onto the stage, straight to Marcus. Marcus opened his eyes, breathing hard, looking disoriented, as if he'd been somewhere else entirely and had just returned. Simon stopped in front of him. For a long moment, he just stared at Marcus, his expression a mixture of shock, respect, and something that might have been anger at the injustice of it all. "Where have you been?" Simon said, his voice rough with emotion. "Where the hell have you been?" Marcus looked at him, confused. "That voice," Simon continued, louder now so the audience could hear. "That extraordinary world-class voice has been wasted on the streets for 8 years. That's not just tragic, that's criminal." He turned to the audience. "Do you understand what we just heard? That wasn't good. That wasn't even great. That was perfection. That was a voice that should be performing at La Scala, at the Met, at Covent Garden, and he's been singing for spare change outside a tube station." Simon turned back to Marcus, and his voice dropped. Meant just for him, but picked up by the microphones anyway. "Your wife was right. You have a gift. And today, right now, that gift is going to change your life." He walked to the judges' table and pressed the golden buzzer without hesitation, without consulting the other judges, without a moment's doubt. Golden confetti exploded. The music blared. The lights turned gold. Marcus stood frozen in the center of it all, tears streaming down his weathered face, his hands shaking. Simon returned to him and did something he'd never done before. He took off his own jacket and placed it around Marcus's shoulders. "You're not homeless anymore," Simon said quietly. "As of right now, that's over. Do you understand me?" Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded, the tears flowing freely now. The audience's cheering continued. Wave after wave of appreciation mixed with joy, mixed with relief that this story was getting a happy ending. After the cameras stopped rolling, Simon didn't leave. He stayed with Marcus for 2 hours. He made phone calls. He arranged for Marcus to be put up in a hotel that night. He contacted vocal coaches, agents, and representatives from opera houses. He set up a trust account. He made sure that Marcus Webb would never sleep on the street again. But more than that, he talked to Marcus about Sarah, about loss, about how sometimes falling apart is the only way to eventually put yourself back together, about how 8 years isn't too late for a second chance. Marcus's audition aired 3 weeks later and became a global phenomenon. The video was watched over 200 million times in the first month. Opera companies from around the world reached out. He was offered recording contracts, performance opportunities, and invitations to prestigious venues. 6 months after his audition, Marcus Webb performed Nessun Dorma at the Royal Opera House in London. The audience included music critics, opera legends, and in the royal box, Simon Cowell, who had paid for tickets for 50 formerly homeless individuals to attend. Marcus's voice that night was even more powerful than it had been on the Got Talent stage. Because now he was singing not just with technique, not just with emotion, but with hope. Real, tangible hope for the future. He established a foundation in Sarah's name, providing music education and support for homeless individuals. He spoke openly about mental health, grief, and the systems that allow people to fall through the cracks. He used his platform not just to perform, but to change lives. Years later, when asked about that moment on the Got Talent stage, Marcus would say that Simon didn't just press a golden buzzer. He threw a lifeline to a drowning man. He reminded someone who had forgotten that they mattered, that their voice, their gift, their existence had value. And Simon, when asked about Marcus, would say simply, "He reminded me why I do this job, not to find the next pop star, but to find the voices that the world needs to hear, the ones that almost got lost." Because that night, Marcus Webb didn't just sing an aria. He proved that talent doesn't disappear just because life falls apart, that a gift, no matter how buried under tragedy and time, remains. And that sometimes, all it takes is 3 minutes on a stage to remind the world, and yourself, that you were meant for something extraordinary. That's not just a talent show. That's redemption in its purest form. And sometimes, just sometimes, television can be the place where broken lives begin to mend, where lost voices find their way home, and where the world remembers that everyone deserves a second chance, even if it takes 8 years to find it.